Cool. Alex, so today's topic that I wanted to discuss is something that uh I think is confused with vision,
Hmm.
but is not vision. And that topic is foresight.
Okay.
What are some of the things that you do to develop your foresight, and what does foresight mean to you? How important is foresight um when it comes to planning your life?
Mm. It's interesting when you say people confuse vision with foresight. I feel like vision is what you want the future to be, and foresight is what you predict it to be. And and it's great if you can align the two and have some sort of influence over what the future will look like. But I was thinking about this topic because it's a difficult question to answer. you know, the world is so unpredictable and things are moving so quickly. It's very
For sure.
difficult to predict what will happen just 5 years from now, 3 years. A great example is the election that we had this year. I did not predict that result. This election we had in South Africa. I thought it was going to take at least another 4 or 8 years before we saw our government change, and it just happened. So, look, I guess what I would say for me, as far as predictions are concerned, I try and pay attention to the landscape around me and what kind of trends I'm seeing, and just noticing the subtle shifts in things that a lot of people maybe miss, and trying to stay agile. That's a big thing for me. And then again, something I think I've spoken about this before on the subject of prediction, but I'm going to bring it up again. Looking to the past to try and predict the future. I know that sometimes that's not always accurate, but I think it is the best tool that we have to kind of have an idea of how a change will affect a society, or it'll affect a life, you know, because we're all human, our ancestors were human, biologically they're the same. So, we work the same and things will affect us the same. So, and then the last thing that I would say is trying to play a role yourself in the future that's coming. Obviously, I don't want to say we're limited in the impact that we can have on the world, but you can't do everything. But if you can play an active role in shaping the future the way you want it to be, even if it's a small role, I would say that's ideal. So I think that's everything I can think of right now in terms of the
Sure.
subject of foresight. What about you?
Sure, for sure. I mean, once again, as most of the time, I agree with you
Mm,
99%, right?
mm,
And I mean, in my eyes, obviously, I think foresight is something that is imperative to have if you want to achieve your vision, if that makes sense. Like you said,
mm,
vision is something that you want to have in the future, right?
mm,
And then foresight is the ability to kind of predict the future, right?
mm, mm,
But I mean, I guess the main question that I would ask myself is like, what informs foresight, right? And for me, I believe, that like wisdom gives you foresight, right? So if you make the right decisions consistently enough, those decisions will unfold foresight.
mm,
And when you're able to make your decisions based on foresight, which is based on wisdom, i.e., wisdom is the ability to make accurate decisions,
mm,
you're then able to realize the vision that you want because you can navigate accordingly and
mm,
almost like guide yourself closer and closer through your actions to what you foresee happening in the future, you
mm,
know? Um, so yeah, for me, that's what foresight means. And I think it's like I said, it's imperative to develop your ability to foresee what's coming in the future because I think that is what essentially allows for you to keep driving yourself, you know, and I think that's also what develops faith, right? and confidence.
Mm.
I think if your foresight is not strong or good, over time you become demotivated,
Mm.
right? Because I mean, like I said, foresight is like that North Star, right? And what foresight does for you is that it just ensures that you are holding yourself accountable in terms of taking the right tactical steps every day to get to that North Star, you know? So if you have blurred foresight, then you are not able to see the North Star and you are almost living life in a directionless manner, you know? You're not necessarily intentional about the destination because you can't see it clearly. You have an idea of what you want and where you want to go, but it's not clear, you
Mm.
know? And I guess this is where things like goal setting,
Yeah.
came in the picture of success philosophy because you have to really know exactly what you want and where you want to go, you know? Um, and most of the time, when you know exactly where you want to go and your foresight develops, you end up landing in a place even higher than where you wanted to go, right? Like I've
Sure.
mentioned it many, someone aims to be uh, a millionaire, they end up becoming a multi-millionaire. Someone aims to be, a billionaire, which I think when we speak about billionaires, there's a portion of luck that comes into that, right?
Of course.
But like very realistic goals are like if you aim to be a millionaire, you're most likely to become a multi-millionaire. Um,
Of course.
because, because that just develops because your foresight gets better and your foresight informs your tactical steps and holds yourself accountable when it comes to the
Mm.
journey and how you navigate yourself towards that vision.
I would
So
just
yeah,
say it's important not to confuse foresight with vision. Because
yeah,
like we said initially, vision is what you want, and foresight is independent of your desires. What do you think is going to happen? You know,
100%.
and I think you can use both to serve you. The beauty of vision is that it's within your control more than foresight is, I would say. Because I feel like vision is local, foresight is global, you know. Vision is your life and what you are trying to accomplish, and foresight is what is going to happen pervasively around you, outside of
100%.
your realm of influence. And I like what you said there about wisdom having a close relationship to foresight. I agree. And I think foresight, a big part of foresight, I was actually writing about this the other day because I was thinking about it within the context of my own life. The best people are those who can operate in the realm of micro and macro, in the sense of they can take a step back and look at the big picture and see, okay, where are we? Where do we need to go? What's happening around us? But they're not so focused on that macro that they sacrifice the micro execution on a day-to-day basis, because that's where the work is done, you know. And you need to combine both of those traits to be successful, in my opinion.
Mm,
Um, because the problem is when you focus too much on micro, you can be chipping away at the wrong things and neglecting the correct courses of action.
for sure, for
So,
sure, for sure. And I mean that's beautifully said, right? I mean, I like how you said vision is what you want, and then foresight is, what is going to happen irrespective of your vision, right?
mm,
And I think in saying that, something like studying and going deeper into metaphysics would really enable your ability to kind of like have better foresight, right? Because I mean, the reality is that, metaphysics is one of the highest forms of knowledge. I mean, it is the study of reality,
yeah.
you know. And I think if you're really good at understanding reality, the world and where the world is going, you're then able to develop better foresight. And I think your vision will change accordingly, right?
Mm,
As your foresight gets better, your vision becomes a lot more realistic, if I
mm,
must say that.
yes.
Um, and you're then able to kind of like bring the two together, even though they're not related. Because I mean, essentially, your vision should be relevant to today's world, right? You can't have a vision of going to live in a cave today, right? As an example, because reality does not necessarily permit that. Where firstly you're gonna find a cave, you probably won't be able to buy a cave unless you're gonna buy a big piece of land and move into the cave. But
Sure,
not even just that, physically as human beings, we're no longer as strong as we used to be. So that cave is basically going to need to be reconstructed into a modern home. It have
sure.
insulation,
You just
all
build
this
a
type of
house in
thing.
a cave, basically. It would be such
Exactly.
a waste of life.
Exactly. So yeah, I think there's just so many layers to it. But I think, foresight is a fundamental construct that people overlook in terms of what they need to develop. And
Yes,
I think if you can start with developing, the ability to predict the future and build everything else around that, you're more likely to achieve more, be a better human being, accept things easier for what they are, and also not necessarily question things, right? Like, I mean, for me, what has really helped me develop my foresight is having a deep and rich understanding of history, right?
of course.
Yes, it's looking back, but I think the better you understand history, the better you understand, and you're able to accept why the world is the way it is today,
Yeah,
and why it will be the way it's going to be in the future.
absolutely. And you know
You
what's
know,
interesting about that is the biggest tech innovators and financial disruptors all have a very strong understanding of history. Well, I
mm,
shouldn't say all, but it's very common. A lot of them have a fascination in history and how humanity has evolved and how things have disrupted the landscape. I will also say this. I think a big part of foresight is creating opportunities for yourself to remove yourself from the current and stand on the outside and look and see what's happening. Because when you're in it, it's very difficult. And when I mean in it, I mean like when you're in a rat race or you're in a business. Let's use a business, for example. When you are busy with the day-to-day operations of a business, it's very difficult to identify what courses of action you need to take to improve it. That's why they have the mental model of working in your business versus working on your business. Working on your business is going to improve your business and grow it. Working in your business is keeping your business going. Those are two different things. It's the difference between maintenance and improvement.
mm,
So,
mm,
as far as foresight is concerned, if you want to see where things are going, it's very wise to put yourself in a place of silence or of quiet where you can look at the picture and
yeah.
see, oh, okay, what's going on here? You know, like there's this guy by the name of Chris Sacco, who's like a big entrepreneurial guy. And in Tools of Titans, when Tim Ferriss interviews him and asks him, what's the best investment you ever made? And the guy said, instead of buying a house, he bought a cabin on a ski resort.
Okay.
And the reason why it was such a great investment for him was two reasons. One was this thing I'm talking about now. He said, for him to attack Silicon Valley and get ahead of the curve, he needed to remove himself from there so that he could be original and predict where things were going instead of listening to what the person around them is doing and then trying to mimic that. That was the one. And then the second one was it was such a great resource for him because whenever he wanted to do business with someone, he would just invite them to his cabin on the ski resort for the weekend and they would become
Wow.
friends. And he said so many business opportunities came from that because the relationships were sincere and genuine, and no one else had a hot tub cabin. So if you invite someone to a hot tub cabin, even if they don't know you very well, people are going to say yes because that's freaking
For
awesome,
sure.
you know.
For sure.
So
For
again, but
sure.
like the concept of instead of buying a house in the city to use the same amount of money, or even it costs you less to go and stay there. It's it's interesting. It's out of the box. You know, it's unorthodox thinking, and it
For
immediately
sure. For
removes
sure.
you from the competition.
Yeah. And it's and I think that's a very beautiful example, right? I mean, that's one of the tactics he used to develop his foresight, you
Mm,
know? And like it's healthy objectivity, right? Like you said, there's working in something and there's working on something. And someone who's inside cannot see
mm,
the full picture, right? And like I think in every element of your life, if you want to have good foresight when it comes to that element of your life, you need to be able to do that, you know? And if you think about it, I mean, most of us go on at least one vacation a year. What is the purpose of that? To detach, right? To
absolutely.
detach, to unwind, to reflect, So, I mean, he was very smart. He put himself in a permanent place of constant reflection and objectivity,
Mm,
and then leveraged that to see where this observation would go into the future, and that enabled him to be original. And that
absolutely.
goes back to what I said. Developing foresight is a very overlooked fundamental concept that really can aid one's ability to not achieve what you want, but align what you're doing with the future, right? It's not necessarily the one who is the best that wins in the future. You can be the best at something irrelevant,
Sure.
right? It's one who's able to fully align what they're doing with what's going to happen in the future, and those two merging together to create a big business or a big purpose or whatever you want to call it. So I think that's what developing foresight allows you to do. And I think when you develop your foresight, the playing field becomes even,
Or even
right?
in your favor. Like when
Exactly,
you have a
exactly.
foresight, you have a big advantage. I mean, look at podcasting and Joe Rogan, for example.
Yeah, 100%.
By the time everybody caught on to what podcasting was, Joe Rogan had 1,000 episodes in the bank.
For sure.
And I tell you now, he wasn't the best when he started. I mean, the first
Yeah,
couple hundred of those episodes is almost unlistenable.
yeah.
Like no offense
Yeah,
to
for
him, but
sure.
it's just him and two buddies on a couch talking shit. So, but he was so early on it that it was just damn, like you can't compete, you
For
know?
sure. For sure. For sure. For sure. And that's the power of foresight, right?
Yes.
Like I think it just makes you realize that like talent or being the best is not always enough,
Mm. And
you know?
magic also happens when there's alignment between foresight and vision. And I
Yeah.
think that's what he had as well. It was like there's a very famous clip of him. He says it himself. He was not the first guy to do a podcast. There was a gentleman who hosted him on a podcast before that, and Joe was saying to him, "This thing's amazing. Like you just have to figure out how to make money off of this," because they were comparing it to what it felt like to go on a commercial radio show or a talk show, and how different a podcast was from that. And Joe was like, "This is amazing. Like, this is what we need to be doing. This is the where real magic lies."
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think what he did really well is he saw, okay, this can be something special, but then he also had a vision for himself where he's like, I want to do this and I want to make it special. And I think that is really where the magic lies. If you can find
Respect.
something where your foresight tells you this is going to be special, and then your vision says to you, I want to make it special.
Mm,
That's that's
mm,
that's magic. That's on the money, right?
mm, 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 mm. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, I don't think we could summarize it any better, you know? And I just want to touch on before closing off there the fact that like, foresight evens out the playing field and that, being prepared and being skilled and having all the talents and being the best requires a dose of timing, you know?
Absolutely.
Um, in
Absolutely.
order for exponential, right? And I believe timing is heavily influenced by foresight, because the better your foresight, the better you're able to time and strike the iron while it's hot, you
Absolutely.
know? So yeah, I think beautifully said there, right? Like the vision is something that you do. It's your flair to it, right? But it needs to be fully aligned with the future, and that is informed by your foresight.
And if I can add just two things from my side before we close on this topic. I think one, timing, we've spoken about how to create your own luck before on the podcast. And I think I just want to add what we said there here because it's relevant. To hit the right timing, you need to be doing the thing before the moment comes.
Yes.
So again, like with Joe Rogan, he was doing podcasting before anyone cared about it. He got good at it, and then everybody started caring about it. It's the same as like paddle is a freaking global trend right now. Everyone's freaking playing paddle. To be good at paddle, you probably had to be good at tennis or ping pong or something
Yeah.
before paddle came about, when no one cared about it. And now, when you start playing paddle, you wipe the floor with everybody because they never
Yeah.
played anything of that nature
For sure.
before.
For
So
sure. For
you
sure.
need to get the right moment of timing. You need to be working on the thing before the moment arrives. You can't start working on it when the moment arrives. So that's one, and that's
For
where
sure.
your foresight will serve you, because your foresight says to you, the moment's coming. Let me start working on it. Um, the second thing that I would say is, I think people in general are very caught up in the day-to-day things of their lives. And this is the biggest obstacle to their foresight being developed. It's kind of like, I can't afford to think about what the world's going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now. I have to deal with my life today, you know?
Mm.
They let the stress block them. And that's a mistake because, like we've said, you know, throughout this episode, you you want to give yourself opportunities. You want to give yourself advantages. Foresight will serve you in that way.
Mm.
If you can think of what future challenges you might face, you can start preparing for it today so that when you get there, it's not going to hit you the same way.
For sure. For sure.
So
For sure.
you got to
For
have
sure.
discipline. You got to have the discipline to say, all right, like my problems of today are going to be here tomorrow. So I don't have to fix everything today. Let me just pause for a bit and think.
Mm. Mm.
That can
Mm.
serve you a lot.
For
That's
sure.
all. Yeah,
For
that's
sure.
what I would say.
And I like that, right? Just to close that off is the reality is that you need to make time every day or at least every week to imagine. And
Yes,
that's why humans have the gift of imagination, right? Because
absolutely.
that's almost like the box where you're able to like think about the future and implement your foresight, clarify your vision, understand your purpose.
Mm,
That's almost like the place where everything begins. And if you don't make time to sit down and imagine, right, we call it thinking, but it's actually imagining,
mm,
right? Imagine what the future is going to look like. Imagine what it's going to be like if you continue doing X, Y, Z. Imagine what it's going to be like if you don't do X, Y, Z. You know, that as a totality really just allows for you to be more strategic in your day to day, like you were saying. And if you neglect that, then what you're doing your day to day might actually have you working contrary to the future. And neglecting that will result in you being more frustrated, unhappy, and yeah, feeling very unfulfilled when the future does come. Not
listen,
because of your actions, but because you didn't make time
yes.
to imagine every day and try align your actions with what was happening in the future.
That's such an important point. And you know what? Like it's actually if you're being responsible, you have to also try and predict where your actions are going to take you.
Mm.
Because often, when people find themselves in devastating positions, they ask themselves, how did I get here?
Cool.
And that's a prime example of someone who didn't look up and didn't pay attention to what direction they were moving in. Because
100%.
it's like if you find yourself 120 kilos overweight, that didn't happen overnight. That happened over time through a consistent behavioral pattern, which
Mm.
you could have predicted. It didn't take a
For
rocket.
sure.
It's not a
For sure.
genius, you know.
For sure.
And it's the same with financial destruction. It's the same with any kind of negative course of
Mm,
action.
mm,
And so
mm,
it's a good mental exercise where you say to yourself, okay, what did I do today? And where do I think this behavior is going to put me in 10 years?
mm,
In fact, I
mm,
think that's called the Dickens process. It's like Tony Robbins does a very famous, very well-known exercise at his live events where when you've got a habit or something that you want to break, you have to put yourself in the shoes of you 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and ask yourself, what is this going to cost me if I continue doing this? That's you using your imagination to predict, you know?
mm,
And the truth is, you can predict the future off of today. And you say, what is this thing already costing me? You know, if you're overweight right now, you know what it feels like and you know
mm.
what it's costing you.
For
And
sure.
you should ask yourself, like, do you want the rest of your life to be like this? And often you don't, you know. So,
For sure. For sure. For sure. For sure. Oh, so well said. And I mean, it is what it is, right?
mm,
Today's actions, things that happened in the past should improve your ability to forecast, right? And reflect on your current actions because your current actions, current habits, um, are the GPS to where you could potentially land up, in the next 5, 10, 15 years. But with that
absolutely.
being said, you can only know what those are if you make time to imagine every day to develop your foresight and align the latter with foresight.
Well
So
said.
yeah, thank you, Alex. Very informative, and I appreciate your time. And I hope this reached the people that it needed to. And yeah, have a good morning.
Thanks, man. I loved this episode. I thought it was really good. And I, even for me personally, I think I took away a lot of things that I can apply in my own life. So,
For sure, for sure, for sure.
all right, everybody,
Cool.
that's us for today. We'll see you guys next.
Later.